to make plutonium-238, which had alpha decays, and they measured the alpha decay as about 50 years, which wasn't too bad. Some long, long years later, I measured it myself as 86.5 by a milking technique, but this was not an easy experiment. So they also showed that this activity was different than Neptunium, had different chemistry. They had to use a much stronger oxidizing agent than they did for Neptunium, and they asked, again, who was it, one of the famous chemists at Berkeley, what oxidizing agent they could use that would be still stronger, and they used oxypersulfate with argenic ion and were able to oxidize the plutonium to the 6, then do a redox cycle with the precipitating the chloride, and then oxidizing the plutonium, precipitating it again, and showing that it didn't follow that, and that the chemistry was different. This shows Macmillan actually with a crucible here and doing real life chemistry. So in those days, physicists did chemistry, chemists did physics, and of course that's what we call nuclear chemistry, I think. And this shows Phil Abelson at about that time. And here's Joe Kennedy, the year, I think it's 1940, and he had gone with Seaborg to Seaborg's home in LA, in Southgate, near what's now the Watts section, and that's taken at the Seaborg home. And here's Art Wall taken a few years later. I think that by this time he is at Washington University, either that or he's in the basement of Gilman over there somewhere. And we're never going to get through this at all, but anyway. There's Glenn Seaborg at about the same time with the Geiger counter. And this was submitted as a secret report, March 21st, 42, was published in the Journal of the ACS some long time later in 1948. And this shows Glenn and Helen Seaborg in December. Whoops, they're tall, but not that. But anyway, shows them in downtown San Francisco, December of 41. So you see, even with discoveries of plutonium going on and a few other things, he still had a chance to go out to downtown San Francisco. And this was the first Christmas he had not gone home to see his family, so I knew it was really serious. Well, about this time, they measured the fission cross-section, as Garrett Friedlander told you about, measuring the fission cross-section for plutonium. It was decided that Seaborg and part of the group should go back to Chicago, and Seaborg was asked to start a group there in Chicago at the Met Lab, and the aims of that group were to develop methods for production of plutonium-239. I didn't have a chance to tell you how they made 239, but you can figure that out, and you've seen it many times anyway. And it was a big extraction process. Anyway, after that finding that plutonium-239 had about a 50% larger thermal neutron cross-section than uranium, they decided that they must start this group at the Met Lab. And so Seaborg recruited people to go there. Some of them went there. Some of Art Wall, Joe Kennedy, stayed a little while longer at Berkeley, and then they went to Los Alamos and returned. I wanted to show this picture because this is the group at Los Alamos, which Gerhard, is Gerhard still here? Because I was going to ask him, I don't know all these people, but Gerhard is right over here. And Rod Spence, who Bar mentioned, is here. There are many other people you may recognize in this group, and this was taken in about 1945-46, just after Art Wall had left and Garrick was to become group leader of that group. So the group that started at Berkeley now is split, and this now is the group at the Met Lab, and I show this because there's Al Ghiroso, and here's later became a friend of mine, Kay Gavin, Kay Florin, and this is a Christmas. They worked very hard, as you've been told, trying to figure out first how to produce plutonium in large quantities in the Hanford piles, and then how to separate it. And the whole process was designed on the basis of a few micrograms of plutonium. The scale up to Hanford was of the order of 10 to the 9. And this, they also played golf once in a while as part of all the hard work. Ghiroso, Seaborg, Manning, who became division director at Argonne, H.P. Robinson. And so they did have some fun too, but they worked very, very long hours and very hard. I wanted to just mention a few things. I'm often asked, did this group that was working with plutonium have any idea of the precautions that should be taken, and did they try to protect themselves when they were scaling up and so on? And early on in Seaborg's famous journal, it was in beginning of 1944, he said, I've given further thought, have held discussions with a number of people. As a result, I'm seriously worried about the health of the people in my section for which I'm responsible, since they'll soon handle such relatively large amounts of plutonium. And so he suggested that of the first 500 milligrams of plutonium that they were going to get, that they allocate 5 or 10 milligrams for medical studies. And this shows, actually that's Earl Hyde using the manipulators at the Met Lab at the University of Chicago. And this is Stan Thompson. Not that you could tell, but he's in full protective clothing. So yes, they did worry about these things, and they took nose swipes, they took filter paper samples, and were very, very careful with these things. Well, to quickly go on, based on their scale, their process, they were able to design the plant at Hanford, and there's the one of the lab places. And of course, based on the actinide hypothesis, where you put 95 and 96 down here, it was possible to study and discover Curie and evolution. And this was announced on the Quiz Kids show on November 11th, 1945, which was a very popular show. There's Al again with the tiny video. And here, to show that the people from the original group went all over, this is Art Wall and Joe Kennedy, who started the fusion program and cyclotron work at Washington U. St. Louis. And then the group went back to Berkeley. There's Lawrence with the 884-inch cyclotron. And this is at the time of the Stan Thompson and Seaborg. Seaborg, and they were always good show people and got a lot of attention from the press. And that shows them at about the time of the discovery of Berkeley and California. And Al, again, always with the newest detectors. And that's the discovery of Berkeley. Now, I'll show my slide with Mike. And this is my picture of what happened. You can see there was capture of all the way up to 255, which is 17 neutrons. And then, of course, we get into the production of heavier elements, not with neutrons, but with heavy ions. And I won't have to go, I just want to, we go through all of them with the various discoverers. Laurentium, and the discoveries. It's like going through a family picture album. You can't tell who to leave out. And I did want to mention that while Seaborg was at the AEC, he became AEC chairman in '61, served till '71. During that time period, the hyper-throughput production program was started, the Oak Ridge trench uranium research program, and this has been a legacy and a dowry that we've all had to this day. And during his tenure, somebody said the AEC was a good thing. During his tenure from '61 to '71, fundamental research in physical chemistry, biochemistry, medicine doubled in those years. So he truly was. That was 104 and 5. I have to mention that during the last San Diego meeting in '94, Ken Hewlett got the award in nuclear chemistry, announced the naming of element 106, Seaborgium, and we had a big party at the Institute, Seaborg Institute at Livermore, and we thought it was all settled. Well, I won't go through any more of that. I'll just say that finally it is all settled, and 106 is named Seaborgium, and I think I'll just put on one last transparency. I guess it's here actually, Ken. I don't need it. Thanks. Which shows the discovery of the trench uranium elements. Some 150 years here. Then you see how the discoveries went. They were made by so-called hot fusion up through 106. Then the preeminence in this field shifted to GSI, where they produced and discovered 107, 8, and 9. Another big gap, and then they improved their online system and discovered 110, 11, 12. Then we decided to get back in the game, and in the year 2000, Ken Gregory, project leader for the Berkeley gas field separator, and our group discovered 118, 16, 14. Livermore Dubna groups have reported 114 and 16. So here we are today. This is where we've come, and I think it's truly remarkable. And we did a lot of foreign collaborations to look at the chemical properties as well. And the chemistry. So now we're back to cold fusion again, and the Russians are back to hot fusion. And I think, there's Victor and Ken. And so we're back to this heavy element topology. We come out here. There are longer life things out here for both chemical studies and nuclear studies. So that's the future. I see much more future ahead of us, even more than past behind us. And sorry I didn't do this in this length of time. But anyway, thank you.
Okay, if there's a burning question, maybe we can do one right now. Anybody?
In the letter that Minner wrote, you alluded to, or she alluded to at the bottom, that the 24-minute half-life one was uranium-239. So that was established well before, that there was, she said it beta decayed, so I guess they knew there was element 93 already.
Oh.
Well before that.
Well, before which?
Well, that was 1939, but
Oh.
they said the discovery was in 1940. But they already knew it beta decayed to something, obviously element 93, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know.
She said that uranium-239 had a beta decayed.
Oh, yeah.
So they already knew that there's element 93.
Yeah, there were a whole bunch of
They just couldn't find us at the point?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but they didn't know where they went.
Okay.
I'm not
Fission
sure,
products.
yeah. Some of them turned out to be fission products, some of them did, actually among them, there may have been some trench uranium, but they didn't know for sure. I'm sorry, that's a